welcome to another episode of the MMA Lockcast. I'm your host, Manpreet, aka MMA Lock of the Night, your boy on social media at MMALOTN, and the architect behind the MMA Fight Archive, where we're slowly approaching 4,500 fighter profiles for you to browse through so that you can go out there and make sure you leave no stone unturned when you're researching these upcoming MMA events, where we cover 17 different promotions from all over the world and have the largest database of its kind in the world. Why not try it out for free with a 7-day free trial? Link for that is in the description below. Find out why we just surpassed 100 subscribers as well on this service, from predictors, analysts, people that break down fights, commentators, fighters, coaches. They're all finding this service very useful if they do their own studying for upcoming fights. Again, we cover 17 of the top promotions in the world. Check it out yourself as well. 7-day free trial, link in the description below. All right. This week, we finally are here. UFC 308, headlined by the featherweight title fight between Ilia Topuria, looking to successfully defend his title for the first time, going up against former champion Max Holloway. In the co-main event, we have another very solid fight between middleweights Robert Whittaker, looking to stop the hype train of Khamzat Chimaev, and this is probably going to be Chimaev's toughest test to date, considering he's finally facing somebody with a full training camp, and there's actually a middleweight as well. Should be a very, very fun fight, and should really tell us both about whether Whittaker is still capable of being a top 3 middleweight, or if Chimaev actually deserves that title shot and should get the next crack at it. Usually these Abu Dhabi cards are stacked from top to bottom, and this weekend is no different, as we also have a light heavyweight title eliminator between Magomedov, Ankalaev, and Alexander Rakic, not to mention a ton of other great and fun fights. Let's quickly recap this past weekend's UFC card, where we did fairly well, including our lock of the night play that comes through for us with a Charles Johnson as he goes out there and has a little bit closer of a fight than I was expecting against Sumu Darji, but he still manages to get his hand raised, and we're able to cash our lock of the night ticket there. There were 4 events that I covered this past weekend, but I only made lock of the night plays for 2 of them, and unfortunately we came up short on the KSW lock of the night play, so that now brings our lock of the night record to 74-37 for a 67% hit rate. Again, still in the profit, but not nearly where I'd like to be, so still some work to do with about 2 months left of action to go. And then our dog of the night comes through. Hard-fought battle as we were expecting it to be, but Darren, the Damage Elkins, does his damn thing against Daniel Pineda and cashes as a plus 115 underdog for us. He did end up closing, I believe, as a slight favorite there, but getting in on the early action, we were able to secure him as the underdog, and obviously the dog of the night play as well. I believe we went 2-2 on the weekend for dog of the night plays over the 4 events that I covered, so that brings our dog of the night record to 43-74 with a 37% hit rate. Definitely in the right motion, especially after a very poor start to the year for dog of the night plays. Now, quick plugs to get out of the way. The Lock of the Night Patreon page is where you can find all of the breakdowns that you guys need for these upcoming UFC events, Bellator, PFL, Contender Series, which just wrapped up. But also this weekend, I'll be covering LFA, and next week we got ACA, Cage Warriors that I'll be covering for you guys, and then the following week, Octagon 63. So not only do I cover the UFC, but I cover a handful of the regional events, which I normally just drop in written form on the Lock of the Night Patreon page. That is the MMALOTN Patreon page. Link for that is in the description below. That's where you get all the degenerate parlays, all the breakdowns, a ton of great props that I drop for you guys as well. And not to mention, we also dropped the Locky 2-step / Locky Trinity parlay much earlier in the week, so you're able to lock in much better numbers than when I drop it to the public on Fridays in the form of a YouTube video. We've been absolutely smashing it this year, so why not give it a whirl yourself? Check it out. Link in the description below. And then quick shout out to GodzillaWins.com for providing your boy a platform to drop written content on a weekly basis for free. So on Thursdays, we drop the main event breakdown, and on Fridays, I drop the 3 best money line spots. So if you want to take a gander at that, GodzillaWins.com, and check them out for all your other betting needs as well, as they cover every other sport. I run the MMA side of things, but we got a ton of other great writers and analysts dropping picks and bets for you guys for all the sports. So make sure you guys check that out. All right. So just shedding some light here real quick. It is my birthday today, so I am celebrating, hence why I got up a lot earlier than I normally do today, because I was initially expecting to record this podcast for you guys on Monday, but it took me a lot longer to study up this card, not to mention we had some early birthday festivities over the weekend, so I was kind of hungover on Saturday trying to recoup from that. It took me all day Monday to research this UFC 308 card, and now here I am up early on Tuesday morning to record this breakdown for you guys and drop it ASAP. My intention is to get shit-faced all day, so I'll be doing exactly that as soon as I drop this podcast for you guys. So I appreciate the love and support that you guys have been showing me over the last... Wow, we're coming up on 6, maybe 5 to 6 years that I've been dropping content on the YouTube page. Had my ups, had a very low of lows as well, but we battle and we fight back, and we continue to do things that we love to do and try to just be better about it and learn from the mistakes that we've made in the past. And that's what I've been just trying to do. So I'm very thankful that I've been able to bounce back and have a very solid run over the last 2.5 years, maybe a little bit more as well. All the new subscribers as well. Shout out to all you guys. Honestly, that is the best birthday gift. Is seeing the growth of the channel and seeing the growth of the services that I've been providing to you guys, and all the love and new. I don't want to call you guys fans. I hate that term. That the new viewers. I mean, you guys are watching my stuff. You're not fanatical over me or anything like that, but I do appreciate every single one of you guys. It means a fuck ton, and you guys don't know the half of it because of you guys and watching these videos and subscribing to the services and all that stuff, and the fight archive and all that stuff. I'm able to do this thing full time, so that's why I'm able to dedicate so much time to this. The majority of my time goes to the MMA Fight Archive in terms of updating that and stuff for you guys, but again, obviously researching not just the UFC but all the other events that I cover as well. It's a lot of work. And I could not imagine doing it like I used to do it, where I was working a job as well. But being able to do this full time, thanks to you guys, for the last, I guess 3.5 years now. Again, I'm forever grateful for you guys. So shout out to you guys. You guys are the real MVPs. All right. Now with the sappy shit out of the way, let's get right into the breakdowns. I believe we have 13 fights for this UFC 308 card. So without further ado, let's get right into it. First fight of the night, Aslan coming in at plus 100, going up against Rafael Cerqueira coming in at minus 120. Now we'll start off on the Aslan side, who avenged the only loss on his professional record last time around in his UFC debut, as he was able to knock out Anton Turkalj in the third round of their back and forth war. Aslan normally goes out there and squishes his opponents in the first round, mainly because of the tomato can level of opponents that he was fighting on the regional scene. But we saw him get pushed against Turkalj in the first fight, and obviously got finished in the second round. But he learned from that fight. He exercised his demons, and he was able to get revenge in the second fight by knocking him out in the third. Had a very busted up eye, but still did a great job in terms of throwing his big power punches out there to ensure that he was able to capture victory. He's all about explosivity, big power, and he is growing, and these types of experiences will definitely make him a better fighter. He takes on Rafael Cerqueira, who's actually scheduled to fight 3 different opponents on the Contender Series this season. Unfortunately, all 3 of them fell out, so the UFC is like, you know what, we need light heavyweights, so let's just bring this guy into the fold, and that's exactly what they're doing. He brings an 11-0 record to the cage with a BJJ black belt in tow. He's very aggressive with his striking approach, has nasty body kicks, does a good job in terms of finding the button on his opponents and putting them away. He also has that grappling that he can lean on as well, but unfortunately, it's been tough to find tape on him because the promotion that he mainly fought for on the way up to the UFC does this thing where they just privatize all their videos on these fighters. Like if you go to Demo Fights YouTube page and you click on the playlist of the event that he had fought on, you'll see at the top it says 2 or 3 fights or 2 or 3 videos private, set to private or are hidden, something like that. They've done it with Eduardo Mora in the past, who I noticed when she was fighting on the Contender Series a couple of seasons back. They're doing it with Cerqueira as well. But the little that we've been able to see seems to have decent striking. I would love to see his ground game. He has a couple of submission wins on his record as well. He's been training alongside Jailton Almeida, as well as there's another fighter, Bruno Silva, in preparation for this matchup. I'm not sure how long they were a part of the same training camp, but obviously Bruno Silva fighting on this card as well. So it's going to be interesting to see what he brings to the table here. This was a pick'em fight when I researched it yesterday, so it seems like a little bit of love coming in on Cerqueira, and I have to agree. I feel like he has a little bit more paths to victory here. I think he could stand with Ibo Aslan. Obviously, this could be a flip of the coin as well in terms of who ends up landing first. But Cerqueira has more paths to victory, and I think that's going to allow him to probably get this fight to the ground, blend those takedowns behind his striking, and then get to his BJJ black belt where he should be able to snatch up a submission. I think I saw the submission prop at a decently juicy line, so I think it's worth a shot there. But I do think that Cerqueira is the better overall fighter here. Both guys largely facing sketchy competition on the regional scene. I would have to give the slight strength of schedule to Cerqueira besides the Trikali fights for Aslan. But again, we'll find out a lot about these guys on this weekend. But I'm going to go Cerqueira and Cerqueira by submission. Next up, Ismail Naurdiev coming in at -150, going up against Bruno Silva, who comes in at +130. Now, formerly known as the Austrian Wonder Boy, I think he's kind of dropped that nickname at this point in time, but Naurdiev actually used to be in the UFC back in the day. I believe it was 2018 to 2019 that he put together a 2-2 record, lastly losing to Sean Brady, then eventually getting cut and sent to the regional scene where he spent the most of his time with Brave CF. But it's not often that you see fighters get signed back to the UFC after getting cut initially. Although Naurdiev was still very young, I think he was only 22 or 23 years old when he got cut. But even his run on the regional scene, 4-3. He got finished in 3 of those losses as well, not to mention lost to a fighter that just recently lost on the Contender series, and Daniel Kutsi, I believe that guy's name was, and the UFC still decided to sign him back. The intriguing part is, used to be a welterweight, fought at super welterweight for Brave CF, which is 175 pounds, and then now has made the transition to 185 pounds, which at 5'10" with a 74-inch reach, it seems to me that he'll likely be the shorter guy in most of these welterweight or middleweight matchups. So I think this may not be the best case for him to be fighting bigger fighters in the UFC, given the skill set that we've seen from him. He's a slick Muay Thai striker, has some good power, good leg kicks, has a wrestling game that he can lean on if he needs to, but the big flaw in his game is that he has bad striking defense. That's why opponents have been able to knock him out or club and sub him or land big shots, and he's found ways to bounce back and still end up getting his hand raised, but he gets hit a little bit too much for my liking. Has a ton of experience. You're talking about a guy that has will be walking into his 30th professional fight this weekend, and he's still just 28 years old. I don't know if he'll be able to improve that striking defense, especially fighting the bigger guys he's going to be facing here, but maybe he looks to lean on his speed to get him the advantage in some of these fights. We'll see if that actually ends up coming to fruition. He goes up against Bruno Silva, who's on a very tough run as of late, 1-5 in his last 6 fights, with his only win coming against the slumping Brad Tavares. But Silva last time around ended up losing to Chris Weidman in a very controversial matchup. Now, although he was probably about 2 minutes away from losing a decision anyway, he got repeatedly eye-poked throughout that matchup, and the second time, or the third time possibly, was the one that led to the ending of the fight, where we saw Chris Weidman actually poke him in the eye with both hands and then land a shot over the top that dropped Bruno Silva, and it wasn't a big shot that seemed to concuss Silva at all. I think Silva dropped more so due to the double eye poke that he received that seemed very deep, and then obviously Weidman took advantage of that opportunity, landed some big ground and pound shots, and ended up getting his hand raised there. But on rewatch, it still would have gone to the scorecards, considering the foul resulted in Bruno Silva being unable to continue, and then the decision still would have gone Chris Weidman's way. So regardless, not a good look from Bruno Silva. He wasn't that urgent in the grappling realm, allowing Chris Weidman to eat up a lot of clock, riding his back from the against the cage. A lot of control time for Weidman. Weidman's striking looked a little bit improved as well, and we didn't see the type of knockout power that we're normally used to seeing out of a guy like Bruno Silva. So very unfortunate type of performances that we've been seeing from Silva, where he's really been muzzled and unable to utilize his big power that has made him so successful. Now, coming in against Naurdiev, I do think Naurdiev is the better overall fighter. The issue I have is, again, fighting a bigger Bruno Silva. And having the striking defense that he has, or lack of striking defense he has, could leave openings for a guy like Bruno Silva to land down the pipe and possibly find the finish. That's why I'll have to stay away from this fight. I do think Naurdiev is the better fighter, but I don't often like leaning on the guy that just has that knockout power to try to get the wins, because Naurdiev will be the one that's likely winning more minutes and winning the majority of this matchup, unless Bruno Silva lands that big shot. So considering the recent form of Silva, considering he was unable to hurt a guy as Chinny and Chris Weidman last time around, it doesn't instill too much confidence there. But again, Naurdiev, a lot of things working against him coming back into the UFC. Let's see how he looks in this first fight, and then we can see how we can bet him moving forward. But I'm going to go Naurdiev, and Naurdiev by decision. Our next up, Renat Fakhretdinov coming in at -240, going up against Carlos Leal, coming in at +200. Now, starting off on the Fakhretdinov side, everybody's been kind of chirping at him and saying he's not as good as his record looks ever since he joined the UFC back in 2022. Obviously, he was able to dust a few of his first couple of opponents, but his last two fights have been very difficult. He did a great job in terms of grinding out Elizeu Zaleski through 10 minutes before the opening minute of the third round, where Zaleski was able to hurt him to the body very badly. But we saw a great recoverability from Fakhretdinov, which allowed him to see the final bell. Unfortunately, two judges ended up scoring that fight a 10-8, or that round at 10-8, what ended up causing the fight to go to a majority draw, allowing Zaleski to avoid a loss in that matchup. That was followed up with a victory over Nicolas Dalby, which was a very hard-fought victory. We saw Fakhretdinov have a good, solid first round, end up falling behind a little bit in the second round, and then was fighting tooth and nail in the third round to just squeak out that split decision victory over Dalby. And an argument could be made for Dalby in that round as well, but I thought Fakhretdinov did enough control and damage to outweigh any of the work, mostly defensive work, from Nicolas Dalby that night. Fakhretdinov is all about the grappling. He wants to take you to the ground, smash you from that top position, or find submissions, or even grind you out and go to that full 15-minute decision if required. He likes challenging himself in the grappling realm, as we saw him take on Craig Jones, I believe a year or so back. Lasted about 11 minutes before he ended up getting tapped out by the superior BJJ specialist, but still a feather in Fakhretdinov's cap to be able to survive 10 minutes against somebody as legit as Craig Jones in the grappling realm. Fakhretdinov's striking is very wild, a lot of power, which has led to a couple quick finishes, most notably against Kevin Lee recently, but a lot of his success comes from taking opponents to the ground and grinding them out from that top position. His opponent this weekend, Carlos Leal, I am very excited, is finally in the UFC, as he has put together a good enough resume to be on this level. Now, he started off his career 6-3, but since that has gone 15-2, with his two losses coming to Sadhu C in the PFL promotion. But I believe that he was very deserving of winning that second fight, which he ended up losing by split decision. He has big, powerful strikes, good combinations, good leg kicks as well, but also has a grappling game that he can lean on if he feels that he has that advantage over his opponents. He's been kind of beating up on bums in his last couple fights, even as a win over Ray Cooper before those Sadhu C fights. But he is more than deserving of being in the UFC. Now, I don't know if he'll be able to crack that top 10 of this division, but he is still a guy that is worth keeping an eye on, and is more than likely able to pull off some upsets against certain guys that people don't believe that he'll be able to beat. He was scheduled to actually fight today, Tuesday of fight week, for UAE Warriors, but luckily for him, he gets the call up to the UFC, which is the promotion he should have been with all along, and I think that this is a guy that's going to have a long future with the UFC. Again, maybe not championship material, but still a guy that will be a very tough test for guys looking to break into the top 10, but also be able to be the guy to keep those guys out of the top 10 as well. In this matchup, I do think Fakhretdinov's wrestling will come through for him. Now, I don't think Leal will be as dangerous as Dalby or Zaleski were in the third round of their matchups against Fakhretdinov. So I do believe we'll see Fakhretdinov do a good enough job in terms of getting to his wrestling, getting that top control and controlling this. But I don't think he'll be able to finish a guy like Leal, who is very tough to put away. So I think I'll be leaning more so on Fakhretdinov to win this fight on the scorecards. And I just think his relentless wrestling, his chain wrestling, his top pressure is going to be a little bit too much for a guy like Carlos Leal to deal with. He might be able to pull off a reversal here or there, might have some striking success here and there, but the majority of this matchup will likely take place with Fakhretdinov getting some solid control time up against the cage or even on the ground from that top position. Give me Fakhretdinov by decision. All right, next up, Farid Basharat coming in at -600, going up against Victor Hugo, who comes in at +425. no need to really spend too much time on this matchup because I do believe it is quite lopsided. We do have Farid Basharat, who's on a very solid run right now, undefeated throughout his career. He was originally scheduled to fight Montel Jackson back in June, but unfortunately that fight was canceled due to Basharat pulling out. Earlier in the year, he was able to go out there and do a great job in terms of, grinding out a very tough fighter like Taylor Lapilus, who had a technical striking advantage but was unable to implement it as he was dealing with Basharat's overall game and eventual grappling game, which led to him getting his hand raised. Basharat is an educated and disciplined striker who does a great job in terms of using the pull counter technique in terms of pulling a strike out of his opponent and countering them effectively, but I think he has been looking best when he's been able to take opponents to the ground and do a great job in terms of staying ahead of them in terms of scrambles and then obviously dominating them from that top position, which sometimes opens up submission opportunities, but more often now we'll see him go to the decision and get his hand raised there. He takes on striker Victor Hugo, who actually looks to grapple more than he looks to strike in terms of the regional tape that I saw him leading into the Contender Series matchup that he had last year. But he did have a successful UFC debut as he was able to take out short notice Miguel Falcao in somewhat of a closer fight than people expected, considering that Falcao took that fight on short notice. But Hugo did a good job in terms of stopping most of the grappling attempts that were coming his way and dishing out the damage to get the edge on the judges' scorecards, which allowed him to win that matchup. He has some, I think he's a poor man's Gene Silva with a little bit more of a desired grappling game rather than Gene Silva, who just looks to take people's heads off. Again, not the greatest fighter. He's on a 14-fight winning streak, but again, I'm very questioning in terms of a lot of the fights that he had, the stylistic advantages he had in those matchups as well. I think he's going to struggle heavily here against Basharat, who will be very competitive in the striking realm, but eventually start getting to his grappling, and I think he'll be able to muzzle the submission attempts that will likely be coming from Victor Hugo. He'll be able to wear him down, and then I think he eventually cruises to a decision victory here. Shouldn't be too hard of a fight here for Basharat as he secures, I believe, his 12th or 13th victory. I can't remember off the top of my head here. All right. Next up, Kennedy Nzechukwu coming in at minus 700, going up against Chris Barnett, who comes in at plus 500. Now, this will be the heavyweight debut of Kennedy Nzechukwu, who is scheduled to face a couple of different opponents, but fate has put these two together after a couple of circumstances for Barnett. Pulled him out of his matchups as well. Nzechukwu had a very flat and disappointing performance last time around against Ovince St. Preux, allowing the veteran to chip away at him and just beat him in a very close decision victory. Nzechukwu is a guy that was largely reliant on his physicality and raw abilities earlier on in his career to get wins, but has showed some maturity and growth in his game, being a little bit more technical, but might be to his detriment as he's not really putting his foot on the gas when he needs to. It felt like in the Ovince St. Preux fight, he could have just put a barrage of shots together to either, distance himself from St. Preux on the scorecards, or at least find a big shot to put St. Preux away, who we know is a durability liability throughout his career, especially seeing how he got knocked out and finished by Ryan Spann last time around. I think it was club and sub. It was a club and sub, but still got hurt very badly. Nzechukwu, long, lanky, again, growing up in the UFC, fighting these higher level guys. This should be a layup for him, right? He's going up against a guy, Chris Barnett, who's a fan favorite because of his unorthodox physique. Let's be straight up about it. He's completely out of shape, but has tremendous athleticism, can pull off flips and spinning techniques. Even had a wheel kick KO over Gian Vellante 2 wins ago. He's a veteran. I believe he has 31 fights under his belt as well. Fought all over the world, has a ton of experience against legitimate heavyweights around the world. But it's clear that when he fights guys that have an overall MMA advantage over him, he'll likely end up coming up short. But we can't completely count him out over here against Kennedy Nzechukwu, as his explosivity and power could cause Nzechukwu some issues here. I think we'll see Nzechukwu do a good enough job in terms of utilizing his mobility, his footwork, his long jab from distance, and just piecing apart Chris Barnett. I also wouldn't be surprised if you see Nzechukwu look to get this fight to the ground quickly and try to pound out Barnett from that top position, similar to what Jake Collier was doing in the first round of their matchup before Collier gassed down and allowed Barnett to finish him in the second round. But I do like Nzechukwu here. I think that, again, he is the better overall fighter, but in no way, shape, or form would I bet him at minus 700. The over 1.5 slightly piqued my interest. But now the more that I'm talking about it and thinking about it, if Nzechukwu does look to take this to the ground immediately, and smash from that top position, this is going to be a very bad and quick matchup for Chris Barnett. But if Nzechukwu wants to stick with his ways and utilize his jab and keep Chris Barnett at distance, this could easily squeak past that 7.5 minute mark. But all in all, I think I'll end up passing on this fight as it's just very tough to call. But I do go with the youngster here in Nzechukwu, and I think he wins this fight. Either TKO first round from ground and pound, or he just goes the full 50 minutes and just chips away at him. Very, very low confidence on that fight, though. All right, next up, we got a banger here between Abus Magomedov coming in at -130, going up against Bruno Ferreira, who comes in at +110. We'll start off on the Magomedov side, who we saw a very complete version of last time around against Warlley Alves, as he utilized a grapple-heavy approach to just pulverize him from that top position, even getting a couple 10-8s in the second round of that matchup. Leading up to that fight, we had mainly just seen a striking-heavy approach from Magomedov, who does a great job in terms of utilizing his length and reach to batter opponents from distance, and then utilizing his knees and kicks from distance as well to really land his most damaging blows. But we saw him get out-grappled by Caio Borralho. We saw him get worn down and finished by Sean Strickland before that. Two fights that we can look back on and be like, hey, those aren't bad losses, considering you're talking about Sean Strickland, who would go on to win the middleweight title right after defeating Magomedov, and then the Caio Borralho fight, which we know Borralho is a win away from fighting for the title as well. So not bad losses on Magomedov's record, but it was a very redeeming win from last time around against Warlley Alves. If he can show that ability to manage his gas tank better, especially utilizing a full mixed martial arts game, this is a guy that can crack back into that top 10, top 7 range and possibly make a name for himself once again, maybe even rematch one of those guys and come out on top this time. He goes up against Bruno Ferreira, who was not looking like the hottest version of himself last time around against Dustin Stoltzfus, as it seemed to me, body language-wise, that Dustin Stoltzfus was in control of that fight for about 3 to 3.5 minutes before Bruno Ferreira uncorked a nasty spinning back elbow that hurt Stoltzfus. Ferreira smelt blood in the water, immediately started swarming Stoltzfus, and eventually landed another spinning back elbow that put Stoltzfus away. Ferreira is a Hulk, pretty much as his nickname indicates. This guy's very aggressive, loves to crash forward with big power punches. He's also a BJJ black belt, which we've seen him take opponents to the ground and smash them from that top position rather than looking to lane prey. This is also a guy that has never seen the third round. 11 of his 13 fights have finished in round 1, including his 4 UFC fights. He's only had 2 fights going to the second round. Also, with that BJJ black belt in mind, 9 of his 12 wins have actually come by knockout. One of those has come by submission. 3 of those have come by submission. I apologize. But yeah, he's a finisher, very exciting fighter. But you can see that once fights start to drag on a little bit, he will start to show bad body language. And if opponents can stay away from that still early knockout power threat that he always is, he likely will look like a much more deflated version of himself should fights start leaking into the second and third rounds. And that's where I think Magomedov will end up having the advantage here. I think his length, which is where he'll have a 4-inch height and 6-inch reach advantage, should allow him to stay safe at distance. This could either look like the Ruzi Boa fight for Ferreira, where we see Magomedov do a great job in terms of keeping Ferreira at bay and then countering him effectively and landing a big enough shot to put Ferreira away, or Magomedov just wears him out, utilizes his distance striking for a little bit, starts mixing in the grappling in the second round, wearing Ferreira down, and then eventually finding a TKO opportunity. I do like Magomedov a good bit here. As long as he can manage his gas tank well enough, he should be able to showcase that he's the much better mixed martial artist and should be able to maintain it for a longer period of time, and that should lead to him eventually getting a finisher either in the second or third round. All right, fun fight here between 2 grapplers, as we have Mateusz Rebecki coming in at +260, going up against Miktaybek Orolbai, who comes in at -310. Now we'll start off on the Rebecki side of things, who came in as a big favorite last time around against Carlos Diego Ferreira, but unfortunately, after a very solid first round, he started to slow down as Ferreira was putting up enough resistance and pressure that was causing Rebecki to throw a lot of big shots, have a lot of grappling exchanges, but a lot of them coming up empty in terms of success for Rebecki, allowing Ferreira to start pulling away with this matchup and eventually finding that finish in the third round of their fight. He had been undefeated for 10 years. He had won 16 straight fights, but once he faced somebody that could actually cause him some issues and resistance, it seemed like he started to panic a little bit, start to stress out, hence why he started to gas out and slow down, allowing Ferreira to start running away with that fight. Rebecki's striking game is a lot of lateral movement, a lot of wide winging hooks, but his main goal is to get you to the ground, where he normally does a great job in terms of smashing his opponents from that top position or opening up submission opportunities with his BJJ black belt. He's very tough and strong to deal with early, but if you can put up enough resistance early and start dinging him and countering him effectively, he will start to stress out, and I think that's what he's going to be facing here in the Kyrgyz fighter here in Miktaybek Orolbai, who has done a great job. He's on an 8-fight winning streak, and even the one fight that he did lose on his professional record was a fight that his opponent was even surprised that he ended up winning, because I thought it was a very bad decision, as did a lot of people. But Orolbai did not let that get him down for too long, as he did put together 8 straight victories, with his last 2 being in the UFC and now obviously fighting at the biggest stage in the world. This guy is a relentless grappler who has an improving striking game in terms of being able to be accurate with his shots. He loves that shovel uppercut from while pressuring his opponents, landing pitter-patter shots to open up grappling opportunities, where he does a great job in terms of staying stuck to his opponent. Even in spots where he gets a little bit over-aggressive and ends up on his back, he does a great job in terms of utilizing good technique and good discipline to quickly get out of those spots and then reestablish himself in a dominant position, where he ends up getting back to work. He has a great gas tank, especially for how active he stays in his matchups, keeping opponents in bad positions and constantly looking for finishes, and rather than just looking to lay and pray against his fighters. Last time around, I thought he had a perfect opportunity in terms of finishing Brenner on numerous occasions, but Brenner, we know, very durable, very tough to put away, and Orolbai was all over him like white on rice. In this matchup, again, Rebecki will be very dangerous early here, which is kind of why it's hard for me to originally get behind that minus 310 line on Orolbai. But once this fight starts reaching that second and third round, and if Orolbai does a good enough job in terms of providing enough resistance and scrambling opportunities, he will start to pull away as Rebecki starts to slow down. I do think that Orolbai is the better scrambler here. I think Rebecki might have some good top control and maybe slightly slicker BJJ, but if Orolbai can stick to the scrambling and tenacity that we've seen from him in the past, Rebecki is going to struggle tremendously in terms of holding him in bad positions, and then ultimately start to slow down, allowing Orolbai to land the better strikes on the feet, starting to stress out Rebecki just like he did against Ferreira, and then Orolbai should do a good enough job in terms of grinding this out, either getting that third round finish, or my official prediction will be him winning this fight by decision. All right, next up, Jeff Neal coming in at minus 300, going up against Rafael dos Anjos, who comes in at plus 250. Now, starting off on the Jeff Neal side of things, he did snap a 2-fight losing streak in 2021 by going on a 2-fight winning streak of his own, as he was able to go out there and land a vicious knockout victory over Vicente Luque, and that was in mid-2022, but then he ended up losing his next 2 matchups to Shavkat Rakhmonov and Ian Machado Gary. Again, both top welterweights, top guys that will likely be fighting for the title very, very soon. Jeff Neal at his best is a guy that does a great job in terms of putting his combination striking together, fast, quick combinations, powerful combinations as well, when he's able to land with such accuracy. His takedown defense has worked out very well for him, and he does a good job in terms of commanding the cage against his fighters. It's just when he's completely outmatched in terms of the striking or the grappling where he ends up falling short against some of his opponents. Again, stellar takedown defense, nasty striking, big power. At 34 years old, his time might be coming to a close. He's probably closer to his prime, which is good, than closer to actually ending his career. But this weekend is a perfect test for him to see where he's really at as he takes on a former lightweight champion and a former veteran who's about to be pushing 40 as well. Now, RDA, like I said, he'll actually be turning 40 on fight day. So happy early birthday to Rafael dos Anjos, but this is a very tough matchup for him. If he's unable to get his grappling going here against Jeff Neal, he's going to be at the mercy of the bigger welterweight who will do a great job in terms of dictating the pace and utilizing his striking heavy approach. Dos Anjos at his best was one of the best and probably still one of the most underrated champions that we've ever had, but a guy that does a great job in terms of mixing his grappling behind his striking so that he can put together a good enough mixed martial arts game to really hurt his opponents. The fight that we saw he had against Paul Felder, even though Felder came in on short notice there, is a perfect example of what Dos Anjos looks like at his perfect best, taking opponents down, smashing them from that top position, looking for submissions, but it's really that grind of the striking to the grappling and vice versa. But in recent losses, guys have been able to do exactly that to him. Vicente Luque, Matthias Gamrot. And even though Jeff Neal is not much of a grappler-heavy fighter, I think we'll see him just utilize the striking advantage here to really touch up Dos Anjos. I don't know if he finishes him. Dos Anjos normally tough to put away, but I think that we'll see Jeff Neal dish out enough damage over the 15-minute course of this fight to end up winning this fight on the scorecards. Minus 300 is a little bit too wide for me. You know, I would like to see Jeff Neal closer to that minus 225 range, and I'd be a little bit more comfortable taking a shot on him either straight up or parlaying him at that point in time. Dos Anjos could pull a rabbit out of the hat here, showcasing a better overall performance, but I do think that Neal will do a good enough job in terms of stopping the grappling and then outstriking Dos Anjos here en route to a decision victory. Next up, Shara Magomedov coming in at minus 150, going up against his toughest test to date in Armen Petrosyan, who comes in at plus 130. Now, last time around for Magomedov, I was right in the fact that Oleg Shajak will do a good job in terms of walking him down. I was incorrect, though, in terms of him being able to land the more significant strikes, as Magomedov, credit to him, did a great job with landing more significant strikes and better significant strikes, even off of his back foot. I thought he needed his space to utilize his kicking game, which is what he usually utilizes the most, but we were also seeing some good handwork from him in boxing, which allowed him to really touch up Oleg Shajak and even cut him up with a few elbows as well. Oleg Shajak had a little bit of decent grappling success, but not able to get much big damage off from that top position. Again, credit to Magomedov. He continues to prove me wrong, but I'm still going to hold steadfast in believing that he is not a fighter that will find himself in a title fight or near title contention, as I don't believe he is that good of an overall mixed martial artist. He's a good Muay Thai fighter, a good striker, but I think as we see him start to take steps up in competition, he is going to find it tougher to get his hand raised. And luckily for him, the UFC is likely going to be coddling him en route to being into the top 5 or top 10 of the division, considering the way they've matched him up so far in comparison to how they've matched up his opponent, Armen Petrosyan, so far. Petrosyan is actually coming off of a loss to Rodolfo Vieira, who would twist Sharo Magomedov in knots should he get a hold of Magomedov. But we've seen Petrosyan fight a few grapplers through his UFC career so far, and he is a kickboxer by trade. He has some decent defensive grappling, which has kept him out of bad positions, even against guys like Gregory Rodriguez, but we saw Kyle Bahayo and Rodolfo Vieira get him to the ground and nullify him with that top position. Whereas Magomedov only been fighting strikers so far. So luckily for him, the UFC is kind of giving him the benefit of the doubt and allowing him to showcase the best side of himself. But he goes up against a very tough Petrosyan who has fought a similar fighter to Magomedov, not completely, not a mirror style, but Christian Leroy Duncan was another guy that utilized a lot of spinning techniques, a lot of explosive movements, a lot of power shots, and Petrosyan countered every single one of them, allowing him to win that fight on the scorecards, but most importantly, winning the first 2 rounds with more effective damage. We could also see Petrosyan lean on a little bit of his grappling, which I think could put Magomedov into some bad positions. And then it's going to come down to seeing if Petrosyan can actually advance to a dominant enough position to keep Magomedov from being successful off his back like he was against Bruno Silva. But most importantly, with this fight primarily taking place on the feet, Petrosyan's not going to be scared or intimidated by the style of Magomedov. I think Petrosyan has a more effective striking style than Magomedov, and I think we'll see a lot of counter work here from Petrosyan that's going to kind of expose some of the striking defense on the Magomedov side of things, who leaves himself a little bit open even after throwing those wild techniques that he's been known to get the respect of his opponents from. I do like Petrosyan here. I do think he's a good underdog spot. Again, people will probably just drop in the comment section saying, hey, I'm a perpetual Sharo Magomedov hater. Maybe. Maybe. But with that said, you cannot deny Petrosyan's chances in this matchup. He is more battle-tested in my mind. He is the perfect kryptonite to Magomedov's style, especially if he can even mix in some grappling here and kind of stifle Magomedov as well. But I do think Petrosyan is competitive in the striking and pulls away with the grappling and wins this fight on the scorecards. All right, next up, high-stakes light heavyweight matchup between Magomed Ankalaev coming in at minus 335, going up against Alexander Rakic, who comes in at plus 280. Now, we'll start off on the Magomedov side of things, who it feels like a dick kick every time he fights, because it feels like he should be fighting for a title at all times, because I believe he is one of the best, if not the best, light heavyweight on the planet. He has an educated striking game where he can fight from both stances, southpaw or orthodox, and be just as effective. And he has a grinding grappling game if he needs that to rely on to grind his opponents out if his opponents are finding too much success in the striking realm. Some people have called him boring. I don't necessarily see it completely. There are some fights where he's had to be a little bit smarter and utilize his grappling, but he is also a nasty striker, which has produced highlight reel knockouts over guys like Iwan Kuchilaba and Johnny Walker. But having an ability to take the fight wherever it needs to be to have success is a benefit. And that's what makes a complete mixed martial artist, and that's exactly what Magomed Ankalaev is. If anything, I could knock him for his fight IQ, right? The first loss that he suffered in the UFC at the hands of Paul Craig, tapping out with 1 second left on the clock, or not going to his grappling a little bit more effectively earlier against Jan Blachowicz, which would have allowed him to be more dominant for more rounds. Even when you watch that decision being read, you can see Blachowicz pointing at Ankalaev, thinking that Ankalaev won, and then that fight ends up being called a draw. I thought Ankalaev won round 1, 4, and 5. Maybe I'm a little bit biased. It is what it is. But Ankalaev, very, very high-level fighter, and people can clown on him all they want, but this is a guy that deserves to be fighting for the title once again. He goes up against Alexander Rakic, who's actually on a 2-fight losing streak, the first of which was a injury loss to Jan Blachowicz, kept him out for a while. He came back in April, took on Yuri Prochazka, and had a tremendous 7 minutes before the durability of Prochazka seemed to break Rakic, as Rakic was landing big shots throughout that fight and not even getting a flinch out of Prochazka. And then Prochazka finally breaks him with his pressure, walks him down and starts landing big shots and eventually putting him away. I think that was a big surprise for Rakic, because a lot of people would have gone down from those shots that he was landing on Prochazka. Rakic has a good calf kicking game. He has a good grappling game when he needs to rely on it as well. But I do think that Ankalaev hasn't beat definitely in the wrestling realm. The striking realm will likely be a little bit more competitive. Where I could see Rakic actually having some success with that calf kick, which is obviously the issue that Blachowicz gave to Ankalaev in their matchup back in December of 2022. However, I think we'll see Ankalaev do a good enough job in terms of getting this fight into the grappling realm sooner than later so that he can dominate Rakic from that top position. This will be competitive early, but I do think the fight IQ is much improved for Ankalaev, and I do think that his wrestling will pay off for him a lot sooner here. With that said, I do still think that we'll see a much more aggressive version of Ankalaev. The narrative recently has been that he's been a little bit too boring, hence why he hasn't been fighting for the title when he should have been the entire time. So we might see a little bit more of an aggressive version of himself, which could put him a little bit more danger, but could also pay off for him, as I do think that he can show off better disciplined striking than Rakic and end up throwing him into a trap and finding a big shot here. So I think Ankalaev by KO could be the sneaky prop of the week here. Again, not a lot of people thinking that he's going to go out there and strike with Rakic, but I think we'll see a very aggressive version of him here, which should end up leading to a finish, whether it's a TKO from that top position or walking Rakic onto a big shot and putting him away there. So give me Ankalaev by knockout, and hopefully that leads to a light heavyweight title shot for him. Next up in the featherweight division, we have Lerone Murphy coming in at -255, going up against Dan Ige, who comes in at +215. Now, starting off on the Lerone Murphy side of things, he won his first main event last time around as he outpointed Edson Barboza en route to a decision victory. That was a fight where we saw great overall mixed martial arts work from Lerone Murphy, utilizing his explosive striking approach to set up clinch opportunities and takedowns to do a good enough job in terms of not squeaking, but thoroughly winning that fight on the scorecards. Murphy came into the UFC as an athletic and explosive fighter that relied a lot on his striking to get his wins, but has very much grown up and matured in front of our eyes and become a very solid mixed martial artist who is able to harness that athleticism, power, and explosivity and be a much better fighter overall. And that allows him to be effective in the grappling realm, the striking realm, and the clinch realm, where he's able to overpower his opponents and make it look obvious that he deserves to win most of these matchups. I think he is a fighter waiting to break into that top 7 of this division, which is where I think he really belongs, and is a guy that could potentially be on the door of contendership especially if he's able to get a win here over a highly ranked fighter in Dan Ige. Now, Dan Ige will likely never get cut by the UFC after what he pulled last time around at UFC 303, accepting a fight on hours' notice against Diego Lopez to save the co-main event after Brian Ortega was forced to pull out of the fight on fight day. Ige showed up to the event, weighed in backstage, so did Diego Lopez at 165 pounds, and these guys threw down in the co-main event of that card, and we saw solid work from Danny Ige in the third round, which I thought we saw a bit of an IQ flub from him as he willingly went into the guard of Diego Lopez with about 90 seconds left on the clock when it was clear that Lopez was slowing down and Ige was a little bit more fresher, which would have allowed him to really put some solid combinations together on the feet and have a better shot of winning that fight, especially after being down clearly in the first 2 rounds of that fight. Ige is normally an educated fighter with a good striking game plan, very crisp boxing. He is also a BJJ black belt, but we don't often see him utilizing that offensively, but more so defensively. But there's a clear line between the guys that he can beat and the guys that he'll end up losing to. In his last 10 fights alone, he is 4-6, and the 6 fighters that have beaten him are notable featherweights: Calvin Kattar, Korean Zombie, Josh Emmett, Movsar Evloev, Bryce Mitchell, and Diego Lopez. Unfortunately for him, I think Lerone Murphy fits that category exactly, which is why Murphy finds himself as a minus 250 favorite in this matchup. Look for Murphy to do a good enough job in terms of controlling all aspects of this fight, from his striking to his grappling, and that should put Dan Ige on the defensive for the majority of this fight. And unless Ige can land a big enough shot to put Murphy on skates, I do think Ige will be up against it here, dealing with the guy that's physically much more capable, way more athletic, way more effective with his striking by landing more damaging blows with each landed shot. Ige can land some good damage when he throws in combinations, but the big shots that are coming back his way from Murphy are going to be tough to deal with, especially when you deal with the speed advantage that Murphy will likely have as well. So give me Murphy here. I think Murphy goes out there and puts a solid performance, wins this fight on the scorecards against Dan Ige, and sets himself up for a potential another fight night main event that could put him on the doorstep of a title shot. All right, co-main event here. Big time fight in the middleweight division as we have former champion Robert Whittaker coming in at plus 210, going up against Khamzat Chimaev, who comes in at minus 245. Now we'll start off on the Robert Whittaker side of things, who has fought pretty much everybody at 185 pounds and always finds his way to bounce back from losses and get himself back into a title shot opportunity. He did it twice against Israel Adesanya, and even against Dricus du Plessis, he came up short. I believe that was 3 fights ago, but he's managed to bounce back with a win over Paulo Costa and then a dominating victory over Ikram Aliskerov. A win this weekend over a guy like Khamzat Chimaev could possibly put him in a spot to earn that rematch against Dricus du Plessis, which will be hard to deny considering the resume that he's put together. Whittaker has an underrated wrestling background that he can lean on if he needs to, but it's really his karate style of striking that allows him to dart in and out of range from his opponents and land big shots, which ultimately led to that knockout victory that we saw against Ikram Aliskerov. He's very good in terms of pivoting off, finding the angles that he needs, and blitzing forward with speed to land those straight shots down the pipe, which often catches opponents off guard. It's been his wrestling as well that has gotten him out of some tight situations, and it's been very impressive to see him fight at 185 pounds after starting his career at 170, but also being very effective and successful at 185. His only losses at this weight class have come against Israel Adesanya and Dricus du Plessis. Both guys, former and current champion. High level shit there. He goes up against Khamzat Chimaev, who has really had a fall from grace in terms of being a fan favorite. You're talking about a guy that went 3-0 to start his UFC career in the span of 2 months. The first 2 wins coming in the span of 10 days. Then he takes off a year, comes back, fights Li Jingliang, beats him, goes away, comes back, fights Kevin Holland, and then fights Kamaru Usman, who took that fight on Fight Week. We also saw the Gilbert Burns fight squeezed in there as well. The Burns fight made Chimaev look a little bit more human than people were expecting. And again, I've really thought that Burns has been an overrated fighter throughout his career. So to see Burns be able to do that to Chimaev obviously led me to have some confidence in Kamaru Usman, who I believe if he had more of a training camp, likely would have been a little bit more effective. I believe Chimaev clearly won the first round. I thought Usman did enough to win the second round. And then the third round, I thought Usman was winning the majority of it, but he spent a little bit too much time on his back, even though Chimaev wasn't landing that much damage from that top position. And there is an argument that Usman should have won that round as well. I thought the perfect scorecard for that fight would have been 28-28 with with Chimaev getting a 10-8 in the first round, and then Usman winning the next 2 rounds, 10-9, 10-9. But, Usman got the better of the striking for the most part. Chimaev obviously had some good grappling sequences, holding Usman down as we've never seen before. But when he doesn't have that opportunity to control opponents from that top position, that's where he ends up struggling and then having success in the striking realm. He has big power in the strikes, and that's obviously going to be a threat that Whittaker needs to be wary about for this matchup. If Chimaev lands perfectly on the chin here, we've seen Whittaker have durability issues in the past and sometimes be able to battle back for them, like he did against Jared Cannonier and like he did against Paulo Costa, or he ends up succumbing to them and getting knocked out like he did against Israel Adesanya and Dricus du Plessis. But the fact of the matter is that this is the most prepared and toughest stylistic matchup that Chimaev has ever had in his career. You're talking about a full camp Robert Whittaker. You're talking about a Robert Whittaker that's not going to give up too much control time to Chimaev. I think we'll see a good enough fight, defensive wrestling from Whittaker to keep this fight on the feet. And then in the striking realm, I think Whittaker is a better striker than Kamaru Usman, and we saw what type of success Usman had on the feet against Chimaev. All Whittaker has to be worried about is the big power coming back his way in terms of what Chimaev brings to the table. But stylistically, Whittaker is normally a very good defensive striker in terms of his karate style, getting in and out of range of his opponents. I don't think he'll train a lot of the pocket with Chimaev, which is where Chimaev has had a lot of success in the past, which should allow Whittaker to have some movement from distance and then start darting in and out of range, landing some big shots and causing Chimaev some issues. Mixing the fact that Chimaev's health has been a big topic of discussion over the last couple of years. Who knows how much that continues to eat away at him and possibly deters his performances moving forward. It's tough to pass up Robert Whittaker at plus 210 here. Talking about a former champion, still in his prime, and when his durability shows up, is possibly the best middleweight in the world. And you're going up against a guy in Chimaev who struggled with Gilbert Burns, who is a guy that I think Robert Whittaker would walk all over. You're talking about a guy in Chimaev who struggled with the striking of Kamaru Usman. Again, Whittaker, likely better striker than Usman. So if Whittaker's durability holds up here, look for Whittaker to touch up Hamza Chimaev, maybe get a late stoppage, round 3 stoppage. I think he has the much better cardio. But the official prediction will be Whittaker and Whittaker by decision. It won't be a popular pick. But just be open-minded. Even if you don't agree with me and you think Chimaev just runs through him, be open-minded. If he doesn't squash Whittaker right off the bat, this is going to be a much tougher fight than the the 70 to 73% indicated for Hamza Chimaev here.
Hey guys, just quickly checking in to add something to this breakdown that I came across while editing this podcast and getting it out to you guys, was the fact that I overlooked that it is a 5-round fight. And, I obviously already favor Whittaker, but I favor him a little bit more, knowing that we have an extra 10 minutes and knowing the 5-round experience he already has, the cardio advantage he already has, and knowing that he should be safer once this fight hits round 3, he should be able to start running away with it in rounds 3, 4, 5, maybe even finding a finish later on in this matchup. So, just wanted to add that as well before publishing this podcast for you guys. And yes, I am currently at a bar right now, hence the noise in the background, and I am celebrating the birthday and getting drunk while doing so, as you guys can see in the picture attached. All right, let's get back to the actual recording, and I appreciate you guys bearing with this shitty audio quality.
All right, that brings us to our main event between Ilia Topuria, featherweight champion, coming in at minus 235, going up against former champion Max Blessed Holloway, who comes in at plus 200. Now, we'll start off on the Ilia Topuria side, who I've been a fan of for years now. I actually started following him back at Cage Warriors 94, where he defeated Brian Bouland. I believe he was a slight underdog that night, but he was mainly a grappler, a guy that would take guys down, utilize his BJJ black belt, and submit these guys. But since joining the UFC, he's gone out there and just started knocking opponents out. He's knocked out 4 of his 7 UFC opponents, but most importantly, the last one, which has allowed him to become the featherweight champion when he knocked out Alexander Volkanovski. But going back and watching that matchup, I think a lot of that success originally actually came from Volkanovski. Volkanovski won the first round on all 3 judges' scorecards, utilizing perpetual lateral movement, good jabs down the middle, good kicks from distance, and doing a good job in terms of not engaging in the pocket with Topuria, which is where we know he is most dangerous. That's where Topuria finally was able to wrangle Volkanovski up against the cage, get Volkanovski to throw a little bit more than he should have, and that's where he landed the big shot to put Volkanovski away. it's been impressive to see Topuria adapt the boxing game. But again, I think it's largely based on his ability to finish opponents rather than actually going out there and winning decisions. Sure, I believe he won the decision against Josh Emmett. Josh Emmett showed incredible durability that night. Probably could have had that fight stopped at any time. But one thing that we haven't really seen from Topuria recently is his ground game. And I think that's where he can be very effective as well. And that's where I think he'll likely have to take this fight against Max Holloway if he wants to look minus 235. But I think the ego of Topuria will likely cause him to strike with Holloway here, which could spell some trouble for him. You're talking about Max Holloway, who's going to have a bit of a size, a height and reach advantage in this matchup. But I think it's going to be a height advantage, not a reach advantage. But still, that will allow him to utilize his jab, which has been so effective for him. Max Holloway coming off a career performance against Justin Gaethje last time around, winning rounds 1 through 3, dropped the 4th round, but in the 5th round was winning that easily, and then eventually gave us that moment of a lifetime, pointing to the ground and knocking out Gaethje with 1 second left on the clock. What has made Max Holloway so incredible is his durability, his ability to take some shots, but he has some good striking defense as well because I believe he lands over 3 more strikes per minute than his opponent because of his ability to put combinations together and put numbers on them. He's very high level cardio, doesn't slow down a beat in any fight, and just stays in his opponent's grill and continuously throws punches. And he doesn't mind eating 1 or 2 shots just so he can throw 3 or 4 back in return. Great combinations, great jab down the pipe. And I think that jab is going to be the key here for him against Ilia Topuria. Now, the speed and power of Topuria causes me a little bit of issue, but seeing Max Holloway's ability to endure damage and still come back and land big shots of his own and have success, not to mention the cardio edge here, in my opinion, and I think he can do a good enough job in terms of his defensive grappling should Topuria start looking for that in the 2nd or 3rd rounds, especially with Holloway having the cardio advantage in those rounds. He could start piecing up Topuria and having tremendous success. Again, just watch past fights. The Jai Herbert fight. Herbert had a ton of success as well. Volkanovski had a ton of success as well. Landing cleaner, straighter shots down the pipe to try to thwart the bull rushing style of the Matador. Ironic there, but landing those wide winging hooks, that's his path to victory, is landing that big power shot to put his opponents away. But in turn, the more disciplined and technical strikers who are able to land down the pipe are going to land more consistently than guys that are winging their shots. So if Holloway can continue to stay on his footwork, land a couple leg kicks here and there, land his straight shots down the pipe, he's really going to bloody the nose of Topuria and cause him a lot of frustration, which would cause Topuria to make some mistakes that Holloway could potentially take advantage of as well. So with all that said, I do have to lean with Max Holloway here to turn up the volumes in round 3, 4, and 5, possibly find a late finish in this matchup. But I think stylistically speaking, if his durability holds up here, which is always a big if in mixed martial arts, one of the most volatile sports in the game, he should be able to put a better body of work together and chip away at Topuria and end up winning this fight late, possibly by TKO, maybe even a club and sub opportunity if Topuria really starts to slow down in terms of his gas tank. But Anu, once again, Max blessed Holloway. Those last 2 picks, probably not going to be popular in the comment section, but put it on your boy. I'm down to take it. At least hear my side out. Be open-minded is all I'm trying to say. Appreciate the love. Appreciate the support. I'm going to go get fucked up now. It's my birthday. I'm going to go get fucked up all day, and I'll see you guys again on Wednesday for the top 3 lock of the night and top 3 dog of the night candidates. See you guys then. Peace.
Last thing.